The wealthiest widow in Arabia could have bought the loyalty of any tribal leader, but instead she handed her empire to a young orphan whose only capital was his crystal-clear honesty. This union, which shocked the Meccan elite, became the catalyst for an event that would alter world history forever. Why did the most pragmatic woman of her time risk everything for a man who would soon set the entire peninsula ablaze in a religious war? Chapter 1. The Golden Dust of Mecca. The scorching wind lashed faces with fine sand. Mecca suffocated under the relentless heat and the heavy scent of camel wool. In the heart of the valley, hidden among black basalt cliffs, life was boiling. Merchants from Syria, Yemen, and Persia gathered in noisy, chaotic crowds around the Kaaba. The clinking of coins drowned out the lowing of livestock. Power in this city was measured by the number of pack animals and political connections. And at the very pinnacle of this hierarchy stood a woman. Her name was Khadija. She belonged to the Quraysh tribe. Noble, commanding, and formidably intelligent, her wealth surpassed the fortunes of many clan chieftains combined. Khadijah's caravans journeyed north, heavily laden with incense and leather, returning with precious silks and weaponry. She had been married twice before. Both husbands had passed away, leaving her to multiply an already colossal fortune. By the age of 40, she was managing an empire. Men circled her home like vultures over prey. The greatest warriors of the Quraysh sent matchmakers. Elders proposed strategic political alliances. The bloodlines of her suitors stretched deep into centuries past. Yet Khadija rejected them all. She possessed a terrifyingly sharp intuition. Not a single one of these gold-draped aristocrats could match her business acumen. They sought access to her treasury, while she sought a man to whom she could entrust her life and her legacy. The mercenaries who led her caravans often stole. Controlling them across the vast, unforgiving distances of the desert was nearly impossible. She needed an exceptional manager. Then, rumors brought her a name, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. 25 years old, an orphan from the Hashim clan. Raised by his uncle, Abu Talib, he was poor, but he bore the title Al-Amin, the trustworthy. Khadija decided to test him. She offered the young man a deal, to lead her caravan to the Levant, Sham. The terms were unprecedented, a double share of the profits. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, agreed. The caravan headed north. Along with him, Khadija sent her servant, Maysara. The servant's task was constant surveillance, to report every step, every word, and every transaction made by the new manager. Months later, lookouts announced the caravan's return. All of Mecca poured out to greet the merchants. The profits were phenomenal. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, had sold the goods at top prices and purchased new ones with incredible advantage. But Maysara's report astonished Khadija far more than the chests of gold. The servant spoke of the young man's flawless honesty, his calm demeanor in disputes. Maysara whispered of a strange cloud that had shielded Muhammad from the blazing sun throughout the entire journey. The cold, calculating mind of the experienced merchant gave way to a profound feeling. She saw in this orphan something that no leader in Mecca possessed. Khadija made a decision that shattered all traditions. She sent her friend to him with a proposal of marriage. It was a direct challenge to the entire society. A woman of millions offering herself to a penniless youth. Mecca held its breath, waiting for the answer. Chapter 2. A challenge to traditions. The answer came quickly. The young man was surprised, but he agreed. This decision blew up the established order of Mecca. The Quraysh elite seethed with indignation. The elders whom Khadija had previously rejected took the union as a personal insult. In their eyes, she was making a fatal mistake by handing her capital and influence to a low-born pauper. The formal matchmaking was undertaken by Abu Talib. The old chieftain of the Hashemites arrived at Khadija's home, accompanied by other clan members. The air in the spacious hall was thick with the scent of cardamom and rosewater. Abu Talib delivered a speech that went down in history. He honestly admitted his nephew's lack of wealth, but he countered it with the nobility of his bloodline, the sharpness of his mind, and his absolutely flawless reputation. Khadija sat quietly behind a thin, translucent silk screen. Her silence confirmed the unwavering firmness of her choice. The deal was sealed. As Mahr, the traditional bridal gift, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, offered 20 young female camels. The sum seemed like a mockery compared to the bride's vast fortune. Merchants in the bazaars whispered that Khadija had simply bought herself a young husband. They were brutally mistaken. She had found not just a spouse, but a reliable partner and a spiritual pillar. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, moved into his wife's spacious estate. Life took on a new rhythm. Khadija handed over the management of all her assets to her husband. It was a gesture of absolute, unshakable trust. She knew that Al-Amin would never deceive her. The trading empire continued to expand. Profits soared. But the true wealth of this union was their children. Khadija bore the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, 6 children. 2 boys, Al-Qasim and Abdullah, died in early childhood. The death of their sons was a crushing blow. In the Arab society of that era, the absence of male heirs was considered a curse. Rivals gloated maliciously. Yet the grief only forged a stronger bond between the spouses. Then came 4 daughters, Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, and Fatima. It would be through Fatima, specifically through her sons, Hassan and Hussein, that the lineage of the messenger would continue. 15 years of marriage became a period of profound stability. Khadija was the first wife of the messenger, peace and blessings be upon him. Their love was deeply rooted in piety and mutual respect. Throughout their marriage, Khadija never once showed disrespect or discourtesy toward her husband. She created a perfect, impregnable sanctuary for him. But as Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, approached his 40th year, the atmosphere in the house began to shift. He increasingly sought to escape the noise of Mecca. The pagan rituals around the Kaaba, the animal sacrifices to idols, and the bloody tribal feuds repulsed him. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, turned his gaze toward the black cliffs of Mount An-Nur. There, at a dizzying height, lay the tiny Cave of Hira. He began spending days and nights there in complete solitude. The wealthiest woman in Mecca did not demand her husband's presence at the markets. She understood that a profound transformation was unfolding within his soul. Khadija herself carried food to him up the dangerous, treacherous mountain paths. The sun scorched the rocks. The sharp edges tore at her leather sandals. She endured the grueling climb solely to support his spiritual quest. The wife watched as he sat motionless for hours, staring out into the endless desert. The silence in the cave grew thick. The air crackled with an invisible tension. Something monumental was approaching their lives, ready to tear the world they knew apart. Chapter 3. The Night That Shattered the Silence. The cool of the night had replaced the daytime heat. Mecca was fast asleep. Khadija sat in her house, listening intently to every rustle. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, had been in the Cave of Hira for several days. Anxiety gripped her heart. Suddenly, a knock shattered the silence. It was rapid, desperate. She jumped up and threw back the bolt. Her husband stood on the threshold. His appearance was terrifying. His face was paler than moonlight. His chest heaved heavily, as if he had run hundreds of miles without stopping. His eyes were wide with a primal, overwhelming fear. He could barely stand. Khadija rushed to him, supporting him by the shoulders. Violent shudders racked his body. He radiated an icy chill despite the warmth of the Arabian night. "Cover me! Cover me!" tore hoarsely from his parched throat. Khadija sat him down on the bed. She draped a heavy, thick woolen cloak over his trembling shoulders. She pulled him close, trying to quell his shivering with her own warmth. She asked no questions. She demanded no explanations. The woman simply stroked his hair, whispering words of comfort. Only when the trembling began to subside did Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, speak. He spoke of an entity that had appeared in the pitch-black darkness of the cave, an entity of unfathomable power. It had squeezed him so tightly that he thought death had come. 3 times it commanded him to read. 3 times he answered that he could not. And then came the words that were permanently branded into his memory, the words of the revelation. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, looked at his wife with eyes full of despair. He feared for his sanity. He was terrified that evil spirits had taken possession of him. It was here that Khadijah's true power revealed itself. Any other woman would have panicked. She would have summoned priests or healers, but not her. Khadijah listened to her husband with icy composure and absolute unyielding faith. She looked him straight in the eyes and spoke the words that would become the very foundation of a new religion. By Allah, He will never disgrace you, for you keep good ties with your relatives. You help the weak. You provide for the destitute. You are generous to your guests, and you aid those afflicted by calamities. Her unwavering confidence acted as an antidote. The fear began to recede. But Khadijah knew they needed proof. They needed someone deeply versed in the sacred texts. She remembered her cousin, Waraka ibn Nawfal. He was an incredibly old man who had embraced Christianity and studied the Torah and the Gospel in Hebrew. He had long been blind, but his mind remained as sharp as a dagger. At dawn they set out to see Waraka. The old man listened intently to the account of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. His sightless eyes filled with tears. His hands trembled. He leaned forward, trying to catch the young man's breath. Waraka spoke the words that turned the world upside down. It was Namus, the great angel Gabriel, the very same angel who had come to Musa, Moses, peace be upon him. The old man confirmed the prophetic mission of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. Then he added a grim prophecy. His own people would drive him out of Mecca. In that exact split second, Khadijah made her choice. Not a moment of hesitation, no second thoughts about her wealth or status. She became the first human being on earth to accept Islam. The wealthiest woman in Arabia bowed her head to the new faith. That decision changed everything. Her home ceased to be merely a stronghold of commerce. It transformed into the first headquarters of the future Ummah community. Islam did not begin in the public squares. It began within the walls of her house, under her absolute protection. But this protection would come at a devastating price. Chapter 4. The Price of a New Faith. Khadijah's home was no longer a quiet haven. It had transformed into the center of a hidden resistance. For 3 long years, the call to Islam remained a deeply guarded secret. Behind those fixed stone walls gathered the first believers, slaves, the destitute, and disillusioned youths from noble families. They all found refuge here. Khadijah fed them, clothed them, and gave them shelter. Her immense wealth began to melt away. Gold slipped through her fingers, turning into food for the community and freedom for enslaved believers. The revelations continued. The angel Jibril, peace be upon him, came to the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, delivering the words of the Quran. Khadijah was the first to hear them. She memorized every word, every intonation. She became the first guardian of the sacred text. When Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, collapsed in exhaustion after the descent of a revelation, she covered him and wiped the cold sweat from his brow. Her faith was the unbreakable rock against which all his fears shattered. But Mecca could not remain in the dark forever. The secret was out. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, stood upon Mount Safa and openly called upon the Quraysh to abandon their idols. It was a declaration of war. Idols brought Mecca gigantic revenues. The annual fairs, the pilgrims, the bustling trade around the Kaaba, this entire system fed the elite. To reject the gods meant to destroy the city's economy. The Quraysh leaders responded with sheer fury. They unleashed a reign of terror. The weakest were the first to take the blow. Slaves were tortured on the scorching sand, with heavy boulders tied to their chests. Khadija could not watch this passively. She threw open her chests. With her gold, she bought the tormented Muslims from their masters, granting them freedom. The Quraysh ground their teeth in rage. Their wealthiest woman was spending her fortune to dismantle their very foundations. The pressure mounted. A dark threat hung over Khadija's home. Stones and rotting animal entrails were hurled into her courtyard. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was insulted in the streets, and dust was thrown in his face. Once, while he was praying near the Kaaba, the bloody, heavy intestines of a slaughtered camel were dumped onto his back. He was pinned to the ground, unable to rise under the crushing, filthy weight. Hearing of this, Fatima, Khadija's young daughter, rushed to the square. The little girl, with her bare hands, fiercely threw the filth off her father's back, shouting angrily at the mocking men surrounding them. Khadija stood behind her husband like an immovable wall. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, later said that she believed in him when people rejected him, and she gave him her wealth when people deprived him of everything. Her support was not just words, it was a grueling daily struggle. She personally bandaged his wounds. She cooked his meals when the merchants boycotted them and refused to sell them food. The hatred of the Quraysh reached its boiling point. They realized that torture and humiliation could not stop Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And so the leaders took an unprecedented step. They decided to declare a total economic and social boycott against the entire Hashim clan. A terrifying document was drafted. No one was allowed to trade with the Hashemites. No one was allowed to marry them. No one even dared to speak to them. The parchment was triumphantly hung inside the Kaaba. The siege began. Khadija, accustomed to ultimate luxury and fine silks, was forced to abandon her grand estate. Together with her husband and the entire community, she retreated to the rugged, mountainous gorge of Abu Talib, a desolate, barren wasteland cut off from the rest of the world. Her caravan stopped. Her accounts were frozen. The richest woman in Arabia became, overnight, an outcast. The darkest, most harrowing years in the history of early Islam had begun. Chapter 5. The Year of Sorrow. The gorge of Abu Talib became an open-air prison. The merciless blockade dragged on for 3 excruciating years. At night, the cries of starving, emaciated children tore at the adults' hearts, echoing off the sun-baked rocks. The Quraysh posted armed guards on every mountain path. They ruthlessly bought up all provisions from visiting caravans at exorbitant prices, just to ensure the Muslims got absolutely nothing. Driven to the edge, people were forced to eat dry tree leaves and boil scraps of old, hardened camel skin just to dull the agonizing pain in their stomachs. Khadija endured this torment with astonishing, unbreakable dignity. The fine Yemeni silks had long been replaced by coarse, rough rags. Not a single trace of her former luxury remained, yet not one word of complaint ever escaped her lips. Occasionally, her nephew Hakim ibn Hizam, risking his own life, would secretly lead a camel loaded with wheat through the darkness of night. The cruel Abu Jahl constantly tried to intercept these meager crumbs, but even among the pagans, there were those who found the idea of starving women and children to death utterly sickening. In that desolate gorge, Khadija exhausted the very last of her savings. Her magnificent trading empire had completely turned to dust for the survival of the community. After 3 years of unbearable siege, the blockade collapsed. A miracle occurred. The parchment declaring the boycott, hung inside the Kaaba, had been entirely devoured by termites. Only the words, "In your name, O Allah," remained untouched. Upon discovering this, a few noble Meccans, sickened by the senseless cruelty of their own tribesmen, armed themselves and publicly tore up the remnants of the pact. The besieged were finally allowed to return to their homes. But the joy of liberation carried a bitter, devastating taste. Years of starvation and freezing nights on bare rocks had irreversibly broken the health of the elderly. The 10th year of the prophethood arrived. It was a time that would forever be etched in Islamic history as the Year of Sorrow. First, the elderly Abu Talib passed away. The impenetrable political shield that had fiercely protected the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, from the wrath of the Quraysh had fallen. Mecca bared its fangs with renewed ferocity, but the most terrifying, crushing blow was yet to come. Shortly after his uncle's death, Khadija fell deeply ill. Her body, drained by the merciless blockade, could not fight off the sickness. She was 65 years old. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, never left her bedside. Agony consumed him as he watched the light of his life slowly fade away. The woman who had believed in him when the whole world turned its back. The woman who had surrendered all her wealth, demanding nothing in return. In those heavy, sorrowful days, the angel Jibril appeared. He brought a message the likes of which no woman had ever received. The angel instructed the prophet to convey to Khadija greetings of peace from the Lord of the worlds himself and from Jibril. He gave her the glad tidings that a magnificent palace built from a single, hollowed pearl had already been erected for her in paradise. A place where there would be no noise, no exhaustion, and no suffering. She left this world quietly, enveloped in profound peace. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, descended into her grave at the Al-Hajjun cemetery, using his own hands to tenderly lay the body of his beloved wife to rest. The mandatory funeral prayer, janazah, had not yet been established. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was left entirely alone. Without her soothing voice, Mecca became unbearably hostile and cold. In losing Khadija, he lost his ultimate earthly sanctuary, but her name was permanently branded into his heart as the greatest symbol of absolute loyalty, love, and sacrifice. Chapter 6. The Immortal Memory. Following Khadija's death, the house felt terrifyingly empty. The life of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, plunged into the darkness of an unprecedented, agonizing loneliness. Mecca grew openly hostile and unbearably cold. Stripped of the protection of his old uncle Abu Talib and the spiritual solace of his beloved wife, his enemies grew emboldened. The darkest, most brutal days of his mission began. A journey to the neighboring city of Taif, in desperate search of support, ended in catastrophe. A vicious mob pelted him with stones until he bled. In those crushing hours of despair, sitting in the shade of a grapevine with his feet battered and bleeding, he missed her calming voice more than ever. But even having left this world, Khadija remained his invisible, unshakable pillar of strength. Years passed. Islam grew mighty. The community made the migration, the hijrah, to Medina. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, became a recognized, powerful leader, a judge, and a military commander. New wives entered his life, but Khadija's place in his heart remained absolutely sacred and untouchable. He never forgot her. Whenever a sheep was slaughtered in his household, the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, would personally select the finest cuts of meat. "Send this to the friends of Khadija," he would unfailingly request. Even a random knock on the door, or a voice resembling that of her sister Hala, would make his heart race, overwhelmed by a flood of profound memories. This incredible, fiercely loyal devotion to the memory of his late wife sparked jealousy. His young and beloved wife Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, would later honestly confess that she had never been as jealous of any living wife as she was of the one she had never even met. One day, Aisha lost her patience. Stung by yet another tender recollection from her husband, she exclaimed with youthful impulsiveness, "Why do you constantly remember that old Qurayshi woman? Hasn't Allah replaced her for you with someone better?" The face of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, changed instantly. His voice rang with cold steel, yet overflowed with boundless, piercing gratitude. "By Allah, He has not replaced her for me with someone better," he answered firmly. "She believed in me when people rejected me. She trusted me when people called me a liar. She supported me with her wealth when people deprived me of everything. And Allah granted me children only through her." Aisha instantly realized her great mistake. Never again did she dare to utter a single bad word about Khadija. The immense wealth of the first Muslim woman had been spent to save the community, but she left behind a treasure far exceeding any gold. Her youngest daughter, Fatima, became the matriarch of all the descendants of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. The blessed, sacred lineage continued exclusively through the woman who gave absolutely everything to Islam. Later, the messenger would name Khadija as one of the 4 greatest women of paradise, alongside Maryam, Mary, Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh, and his daughter, Fatima. The story of Khadija bint Khuwaylid is not merely the biography of a highly successful merchant or a devoted wife. It is the story of the very first, unbreakable foundation stone of a great religion. Without her relentless support, her absolute faith, and her colossal sacrifice, the path of early Islam would have been unimaginably harder. She became the mother of the believers long before that title even existed. Her love proved stronger than the fierce prejudices of society,